I'm very excited to introduce to you today our guests to hear more about what they're up to at UBC. Cureton and Oliver Mann are going to speak about UBC's Community Engagement Network, also known as the CEN. The title of their presentation is Fostering Connection and Strengthening Collective Capacity for University Community Partnerships. They're going to talk about the genesis of the CEN and how it's organized. They're going to share with us some of the successes and challenges they've encountered in this work. We'll also hear about the CEN and how it's developed specific communications projects that have helped raise the profile of community engagement professionals across campus. And I have to say their enthusiasm for their work is contagious. So let me introduce them to you now, and we'll get started. We are going to have, I'll just mention too, we're going to have a poll pop up during the presentation. I'm sure they're going to cue us, and when they do, be ready to respond. It's very simple. I promise there are just a couple of questions throughout the presentation. Kat Cureton joined the UBC Community Engagement Team in 2016. She is an advisor on community university partnerships, and her role is to help community partners navigate UBC and find helpful people, programs, and resources. She also leads the Community Engagement Network. Before joining the CE office, she was a sessional instructor in UBC's School of Kinesiology, where she taught a community engaged learning course for 3 years. She also spent a number of years working in nonprofit organizations in Vancouver, and I had to look this one up, the Affiliation of Multicultural Society and Service Agencies of BC, otherwise known as the AMSSA, Red Fox Healthy Living Society, and Collingwood Neighborhood House, which is where she built her knowledge of community engagement. She holds an MA from UBC and a BA from Western, both in kinesiology. Kat is a white settler with English, Irish, and German ancestry, and she is grateful to live and work on the unceded territory of the Musqueam peoples. Oliver Mann is a communication strategist at the Office of Community Engagement at UBC Vancouver, and he's also a master's candidate in professional communications at Royal Roads University. His thesis research investigates how Canada's largest universities represent Indigenous engagement in their public communications. Through his research, Oliver has conducted interviews with communications professionals and senior leaders in Indigenous engagement from universities across Canada. These interviews aim to uncover the challenges, guiding principles, and recommendations for storytelling that genuinely amplify Indigenous voices and advance Indigenous objectives. Building on his thesis findings, Oliver is currently developing a guide for post-secondary institution communicators on how to tell stories about community engagement in a way that is reciprocal and respectful. And as a former institution communicator, that's something that's very much needed. So that's great to hear. Settler and uninvited guest, Oliver lives on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Hunkaminam, I think I got that right, speaking peoples now known as Richmond, BC. He has a diverse heritage, including Costa Rican, West African, Spanish, Scottish, and English ancestry. Oliver is dedicated to promoting equity and inclusion through effective communication and ensuring diverse storytellers have equitable access to share their narratives. And with that, let's get underway. Kat and Oliver, thanks so much for talking to us today. I'll pass it over to you now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Betty, for that wonderful introduction. And yeah, you got Hunkaminam correct. Yeah, earlier this morning, Betty was asking for the pronunciation, and I shared this video with a few words. And so I also wanted to share with everybody that, well, where I am right now in BC, it's still morning. So in Hunkaminam, at Natal means good morning. So yeah, at Natal. So before we get started, I just wanted to outline what you can expect to take away by the end of today's session. We'll start by exploring the history and evolution of UBC's Community Engagement Network, who it's for and why it's so important. Next, we'll discuss some of the challenges that come with organizing a network like this and how having an advisory committee can make a significant difference. Then I'll share how we use various communication projects, including podcasts and videos, to raise the profile of community engagement professionals within the CEN. And you'll also gain some valuable insights into how social media platforms can be leveraged to enhance community engagement efforts. And lastly, we'll open the floor to hear your advice and experiences in building or improving networks. So I'm going to pass it off to Kat.
Thanks, Oliver. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. For some of you, thanks, Betty and Magda, for inviting us. This is really wonderful to have an opportunity to reflect on some work that I've been involved in for a long time. So I'm going to start by telling you about the Community Engagement Network. It is for staff and librarians at UBC who lead and support community engagement work. We have whittled our purpose down to two things. It's taken some time to get there, as you'll hear in today's presentation. But what we're aiming to do is firstly create and sustain a sense of community among staff and librarians who do this work so that we know who else is doing this important work at UBC. Secondly, our goal is to increase collective capacity and provide tools for reciprocal community-led engagement. Next slide. How we're doing this, how we're trying to create community and increase capacity. We do this largely through gathering people together. I think probably in many of your institutions, community engagement can be quite disparate and widespread across your institutions. So getting people together has been a really great way to try to coordinate these things. So we do it through events, and we also have staff profiles and podcasts. That's something Oliver's going to speak to today. We also try to share resources. I'm going to be talking about our events today over the next, handful of slides here. So what we do is we try to gather monthly, virtually or in person. We tend to take breaks over the summer, and I probably won't get something organized in January, but more or less we're gathering monthly. We do this through a range of ways. We have casual meetups. We have presentations. We have lots of dialogue and conversation among staff and librarians who do this work. And we try to do this in very engaging and creative ways. We try not to have, just these one-way speaking events. We really try to make sure people have time for networking, always time for networking. We're really intentional about our food and space. And that's something that's kind of increased, I'd say, in the last 6 months, as we're paying attention to procurement. Where are we spending our budget? If we're having an event like we did back in May around a partnership focused on migration, let's be conscious about the food that we have. So for that event, we hired food from a local organization that supports newcomer women in launching food businesses. We also conscious about space. So when we had an event to talk about a partnership in Vancouver's Chinatown, of course, we gathered in Chinatown, and we had food from a local Chinese baker. The speakers in the group are a range. We sometimes bring in experts from community or experts from academia to come and talk to the group, but a lot of the time it's people within the network sharing the knowledge that they have. I'll go to next slide. Who the group is, who we are. You can kind of see from this word cloud, it's a range of folks, range of job titles. You might have been wondering, staff and librarians. That's interesting. Librarians are faculty, really important to be part of our group. At UBC, probably elsewhere, we have community engagement librarians. And they are a great source and resource for community partners. So really important for them to be part of our conversations. We don't have faculty in this group. At the time that the Community Engagement Network got going, there was a group at UBC Vancouver for faculty. So that's kind of why it happened in that way. And now our group is just so big. We've got over 250 people on our emailing list that we're really happy to dive into the needs, specific needs and interests of staff. Go to the next slide. This might be difficult to see, but why I wanted to show it to you was to show you sort of the breadth that we're achieving in this network across UBC. So these bar graphs, these are different portfolios at UBC, and we've managed to get people from most portfolios at UBC. It also shows like community engagement is so widespread at our university, as I'm sure at yours. We've got people in finance, we have people in external relations, we have people in our vice president students portfolio. But where we're drawing the most people is this yellow bar, and this is VP Academic, the provost office. So staff that have roles within faculties. And I wanted to draw your attention to the numbers here in this breakdown. So the breakdown in VPA, and you can see a lot of 2s and 1s. So we know that our people, staff who lead and support community engagement, are often isolated and they're siloed. They're that one person in a faculty responsible for partnership brokering or partnership development. Really important to bring these people together. Next slide. Aha, here's our first poll. So before we go further, we know there's lots of expertise in this room. So we wanted to ask you if your institution has a network, a peer group, a community of practice, a group that sounds something like this. So we can launch our first poll, Betty. Should be on your screen. Great to see those numbers coming in. So for those of you who have answered yes, or we're working on it, we'd invite you to use the chat now and just tell us a little bit more. Keep it short because there's a lot of people in here and we want to be able to read all the responses. But if you have a group, you're working on it, what's the name of the group and what's your focus? Who are you engaging? And we're going to come back to you at the end of our presentation to hear your advice. But this gives us a good sense of the groups that we have within this space. I think I'll move along, but invite you again to tell us a little bit more about the groups that you have via the chat. Perfect, thank you. And maybe I'll just read this poll before we close this. Oh, if I click share results, you should all see that. 58% have a group, something like this. 18% are working on it. 27% do not have a group like this. Great, so have a little scan through the chat. Lots of people that can share their knowledge about these groups. I'll go to the next slide, please, Oliver. Okay, please do continue to let us know what you've got. It's great to be aware of these groups. And I'll just start to talk a little bit about the history and evolution of the Community Engagement Network at UBC. And I wanted to share this because I thought maybe others would see their own work sort of within this timeline. And it was also a really great exercise for me to reflect on where we've come. So I started in the office in 2016, and this group had been formed before I started. I believe the group came together for a project, for a purpose, initially, and then they realized we should be meeting up. We should be sharing what we do, partners that we work with, how we work with one another. Let's keep meeting up. So the group was initially a community of practice. It was called Community of Practice for Community Engagement Program Practitioners. It was a mouthful. The group would meet up over lunch, and it was very casual, no agenda. And it was just sort of a very, kind of unformatted social lunch hour. It was co-led. There was 4 people from 4 different units that would organize this together, but no one had really had it in their job description. I would say no one had, direct responsibility for this group. It also didn't have any resources. There was no budget, no specifically assigned staff. So eventually what happened is it started to fade and less people would be coming. So then I was tasked, I guess that would be 2018, in doing a bit of a review of that. Our office, saw there was value there. So I went and talked to the people who had signed up for the group. There was about 50 staff across UBC. Spoke to them, discovered a real range in roles related to community engagement. Isolated staff, as I mentioned previously, but really high interest in networking and sharing resources. A lot of talk about, not wanting to reinvent the wheel, I know that other people are struggling to pay honorarium to their community partners, for example. Can we talk about this together? How can we coordinate? Or I know that we're reaching out to the same partners. We need to know who's doing this work. Another thing that I discovered was there was no common practice. There was such a range of roles and a range of work. Yes, there's roles related to teaching, roles related to research, also a lot of roles that I would call outreach, a lot of events roles too, involving community partners in events. Not all of it was reciprocal, developing reciprocal relationships, but the interest in coming together was super high. So we decided to scratch the community of practice language and just call it Community Engagement Network and make it an open group. So our network is open to any staff or librarians that see themselves within the work and also take interest in whatever our gatherings are focused on. We started by doing a little bit of a tour of community engagement. What is community engagement at UBC? We would meet in different places. So we had sessions at the UBC farm, for example, where we learned how they build relationships and what community engagement looks like there. We went to the botanical gardens, learned what community engagement is for them. We went downtown to Vancouver's downtown east side to one of our sites called the UBC Learning Exchange, and we got to see what they do. Another site in Chinatown. You get the idea. It was sort of a tour of community engagement with lots of opportunities for networking. Of course, the pandemic happened, and we pivoted very quickly to virtual engagement. At the time, my former colleague, Juji Fedor, was running the Community Engagement Network, and we were so lucky because she had the skills and experience already to do virtual engagement. It's hard to believe, but do you remember a time when breakout rooms were new? We were just learning what that was, right? And we needed to learn how to virtually engage in good ways. So we hosted a number of sessions to show people the tools and how to do that, as well as continue our conversations around community engagement and the challenges folks had in community engagement work and sharing what we were doing within our work. Around 2021, we started to change and I guess sort of really lean our focus into increasing capacity for anti-racist and decolonized approaches to community engagement. I think this is reflective of what was happening in society at the time, also reflective of what was happening with strategies at UBC. So I've got two acronyms here. We launched an Indigenous Strategic Plan, and we also had an Inclusion Action Plan. And we were seeing community engagement being reflected in both of those plans. It was calling the university to recognize expertise outside of academia. It was also calling for compensation and equitable compensation for partners, and was calling for more collaboration and partnership. So I'll share shortly some of the sessions we did around these topics, and we're trying to still do that. We did some more consultation. By 2022, essentially, I feel like we were quite good at consulting. We had so much feedback. We had so many ideas that we could do, and I needed some help and direction. I was fortunate to be able to pick my advisory and invite people to join, and specifically invited people who had expertise in embedding an anti-racist and decolonized approach to community engagement. I could see the work that they were doing. I could see they knew more than I did, and I could see that they would push me. So we have an advisory about 6 people from across the university, both campuses, doing community engagement work in different areas. And we come together 3 times a year in which they provide direction for the Community Engagement Network. Shifting now in 2024, we're starting to bring more community partners into our sessions, and I'm going to let Oliver speak to that. Let's go to the next slide. Here are some of our session topics, so you can read through some of the topics that we've hosted, and I'll just speak to them very, very briefly. You're welcome to poke around on our webpage. We'll share it probably at the end of the presentation. You can look through the archives of the different topics that we've hosted. But our first one, embedding equity and community engagement, something that we did in partnership with UBC's Equity and Inclusion Office. BC's nonprofit sector. We invited speakers from the nonprofit sector to tell us what the opportunities and issues were, and how UBC could have a role. And I'll just lastly, I think on this one, talk to UBC staff integrating Indigenous ways of knowing into their work. This is a session we've actually repeated twice, and it was one of our more popular sessions in which we did a call out to units who were actioning the Indigenous strategic plan, and were they interested in sharing with the group, with the network, how they were doing that. And so we've done that, a couple times, and I think it's a good way that I feel we're sort of using our power. We're responding to the plan, but we're also doing a bit of a calling in and some accountability for our group to make sure the work that we do responds to UBC's Indigenous Strategic Plan. I'll go to the next slide. We did 2 sessions of exploring tensions and opportunities in community engagement work within colonial systems. That was actually that circle picture on the previous slide. That was that session. A lot of dialogue. We felt, and I should say it was the advisory who really said, slow down and have a dialogue, a conversation, so that staff within the network understand how and where community engagement work is colonized, and how our approaches are contributing to white supremacist and colonial ways of working. We spent a lot of time talking about honoring the expertise and contributions of our community partners. And for example, when you have to ask your partner for their social insurance number, and then you give them a check about 8 weeks after they came and, did an event with you, and how that impacts your partnership. We had a lot of slowing down and sort of reflecting on the work that we do, how we can cause harm, and what we might be able to do to work in better ways. We also partnered up with some other units who were bringing in Jody Wilson-Rabel as a speaker to talk about this book, True Reconciliation. We essentially did a bit of a book club effort and attempted to get people to read this book. And then we hosted a debrief so that staff could reflect on their learnings in the book and relate it to community engagement work. And we've done that a few times with other resources. Next slide. Okay, just really quickly on here, like, how are we doing this? I used to be a team of 1 doing this work, Community Engagement Network, as was my colleague Juji, who did this before me. And now I've got some support, and I know that support's in the room, so thank you. I've got our operations and program manager, Holly. She does a lot of the behind the scenes work. She tracks our participants that come. She makes sure people are paid honorarium when they do sessions with us. We absolutely have to walk the walk when we're talking the talk. We also have communication support, and you're going to hear how that has been transformative for us from Oliver. And we have an engagement communications assistant, that's JD Ng. She's also here today, a work-learn position who helps me a great deal with this event. Our budget, relatively small, but really fortunate to have it, and we need it for food. Food, I'm sure I don't have to convince this group, so important for creating community. Honorarium for any community partners that are involved, absolutely. We have some travel expenses now that we're going to the Okanagan to program a couple events a year. Go next slide. Okay, so we've had some positive feedback, I'll just say. We have lots of positive feedback, and I'll just read a couple of these. You can read them all if you like. Such a productive and needed thing you're doing. These 2 meetings I've attended have been some of the best networking I've done at UBC. The cross-pollination and idea sharing that occurs at the CEN is essential, does not happen enough in our large siloed institution. And we try, this is going to be one of my takeaways for you if you're also doing a group, like, try to collect these quotes, right? Because networking, I think, is viewed as like a nice to have. But it really is essential for people to feel this, sense of connection in their work. But also, like, I think this last quote here says, I gain knowledge about valuable resources and they save me time and work because I can build on the work of others. And that's really important. We'll go to the next slide. So I just want to share back some of my learnings here, and then I'll pass it to Oliver. Getting clear on scope. I mentioned sort of this pressure of like being everything for everyone, it's taken a while and it's evolved, right? To kind of figure out what this group is and what it isn't. I think a lot of pressure to produce something, maybe develop something. I'm thrilled about this training that Magda talked about because we've been talking about training for a while ourselves. But if someone else is doing that, that's fantastic. So getting clear on scope is a challenge. I would say it continues for me. As I mentioned, collecting data, tie into the strategic plans. Once we could start, tying into strategic plans at UBC, it was really helpful to justify our network. I also have been told by our advisory that dialogue is not in action. Like I was feeling this pressure. We got to do action. We got to action something. We got to create something, right? Tangible outputs. People want to see what is happening out of these conversations. And really the advisory said, like this dialogue is not in action. Bringing people together to discuss their work, for example, how colonialism is showing up in their work. This is action. This is important. Getting clear on the audience, level of leadership, just a quick note. We've had the feedback, sometimes, for instance, we host a conversation about partnership and people are saying some really great things that we want our leadership to hear. But then if you get your leadership in the room, does it change the conversation? Does it change how people might show up? We've had that feedback. If you invite my director to these sessions, I'm not going to speak freely anymore, and these sessions might not be as helpful for me. Not everyone reports to someone who values community engagement work. That's just the reality right now. Seek professional communication support. I don't need to speak to that because you're going to see why in a minute. And hold an advisory group that holds you accountable, and of course, walk the walk. I think I will leave it there and pass it on to you, Oliver.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Kat. So yeah, before I get started, I want to have another poll. So Betty, if I could have your help with that. And essentially, I'm asking, I want to know if anybody in the meeting today does communications work, and if you or your unit are on LinkedIn. Great. Okay, maybe I'll just give 5 more seconds. All right, I'm going to end this poll and share the results. Great. So this is really exciting. So actually, like almost half of the group do communications work, and 81% of us are on LinkedIn. So this is great. Kat was a bit worried that maybe some of my data notes would be a little bit too detailed, but I think this is a great group to kind of really get into the weeds. And if people have questions to follow up, please let me know. So yeah, I think maybe before I get into my slide as well, since so many of us are on LinkedIn, I thought it could be really cool if your unit, if your community engagement unit has a LinkedIn page, it'd be amazing if you could share that in the chat. Just a nice opportunity to network. Betty, maybe if you end up reviewing this chat afterwards, you can compile that list and share it with everybody. I think that's such a nice way for us to network and keep on top of what everybody's doing. So my journey with the Community Engagement Network started with providing communication supports for their events. I focused on creating communication briefs, developing landing pages and registration forms, and handling graphic design. Additionally, I put together promotional toolkits and ensured broad reach through our email newsletters and social media, and also did some event photography. And these efforts really helped me establish a strong foundation for my ongoing collaboration with Kat and the CEN. So pretty much from the first time I met Kat, she was already pitching the idea of a staff spotlight that would really feature individuals at UBC who are deeply involved in community engagement work. So together we developed Meet the CEN, which is a series designed to support CEN's objectives. So just a reminder, this is to create and sustain a sense of community among UBC staff who lead and support this important work, and to increase our collective capacity while providing the tools necessary for effective community-led engagement. Additionally, this series aligned with some of my communications objectives, which were including raising awareness of the various CE initiatives and resources at UBC, and highlighting the value of reciprocal community university engagement. In our Meet the CEN video series, we craft our interview questions to align with our objectives. So for instance, we ask, how do you support community university engagement with individuals' contributions within UBC? We then explore examples of reciprocal engagement to showcase real-world impact. Asking for advice on overcoming challenges provides practical insights for the network. And finally, we invite them to share a resource to enrich our collective knowledge. At the same time, we remain really flexible and let our interviewees know that our questions are just a starting point. And it's important to us that our videos also serve as a valuable tool to support their objectives as well. So I want to share a little case study. This is one of our most popular videos, a conversation with UBC's Center for Asian Canadian Research and Engagement. And so despite this being a longer 36-minute conversation that might seem less accessible to some of our audiences, the reception was really impressive and far-reaching. The video was featured prominently on the front page of ubc.ca, our university website. It was included in UBC's internal faculty and staff newsletter, which reaches over 20,000 employees. And our LinkedIn post about the video also generated over 10,000 views, making it the second most popular post we've ever had. And excitingly, UBC continues to feature this video in various ways, most recently during Asian Heritage Month. And so this example really demonstrates how these stories can resonate far beyond just community engagement practitioners and reach a much broader audience within and outside of our institution. One of the core strengths of the Meet the CEN series is its ability to break down silos and reduce the sense of isolation that many in the CEN experience. A great example of this is one of our earlier videos featuring Shamta Hunter. So when we initially posted Shamta's video on our LinkedIn page, it received pretty minimal engagement, just 10 likes, no comments. However, when Shamta shared it on her personal LinkedIn account, the response was much greater, 67 likes, 21 comments, and just tons of people piling in to really celebrate her in the comments. And so this example highlights how these videos are designed to be equally valuable for the interviewees, giving individuals a platform to share their work. We're not only promoting community engagement, but also helping them connect with their own networks in meaningful ways. And looking ahead, I'm excited to share that a new series of Meet the CEN videos is being picked up and funded by our colleagues at UBC Okanagan. They also see the value in raising awareness around community engagement on their campus and really are eager to continue this work. So I've always been a fan of CAT's CEN events. The speakers are incredible and the insights are truly valuable. And I always thought it was a shame that these events weren't being recorded and shared with a wider audience. So I was also regularly pitching to CAT that we needed to record this and do a podcast. And eventually CAT caved, and together we created the Stories of Partnership podcast. So this Q&A series features reciprocal community university partnerships and centers on the experiences of our community partners. The objectives of this podcast closely align with the Meet the CEN series. However, as I mentioned, amplifying the voices of community partners within UBC is at the core of this project. And just like Meet the CEN, we're committed to ensuring that the final deliverables is of real value to the community partners and interviewees, providing them with a platform to share their experiences and insights, even when those insights might be critical of our institution. So our pilot podcast episode, A Conversation with AMSA and UBC Center for Migration Studies, was recorded live in front of an audience and features AMSA's CEO, Katie Crocker, along with Antje Ellerman, Sean Lauer, and Javier O'Hare from UBC Center of Migration Studies. So for those that are unfamiliar, AMSA is an umbrella organization for the BC immigration and settlement sector. In their conversation, they share valuable insights on how their partnership developed, the lessons they've learned along the way, and why investing in relationship building between organizations is crucial for impactful collaboration. And so this podcast is available now on Spotify, so please give us a listen and follow us. And maybe I'll share the link later or in Betty's follow-up email. So the pilot podcast success really exceeded our expectations. Again, it was featured on the front page of ubc.ca, was widely shared by our office, the Center of Migration Studies, and AMSA. And now the podcast is also being used to promote their upcoming 2024 CMS Sector Research Collaborations Day. So I definitely want to just highlight too that I think for smaller units like us, the big comms teams at universities like brand and marketing, they are looking for these types of stories. They want to share how their university is working with community. And so if you can find people in these teams to really help amplify your work, it can really lead to a larger reach. I think one of the other gratifying outcomes is just hearing how much the interviewees enjoyed the process, as well as their excitement in seeing their story amplified. And this really reinforces my belief that storytelling can be a powerful tool to strengthen community university relationships. And so given this success, we're now working on 2 more podcast episodes to continue this model. So some key lessons for amplifying community partner voices that I've learned along the way include collaborating with community partners and interviewees and setting goals and shaping the questions for the interview, allowing them to review and edit, ensuring they're comfortable with how their voice is represented. Don't sanitize their statements. And what I mean by this is if you're going to give them the mic, give them the mic. It is crucial to allow community partners to share critical feedback or discuss systemic issues. And this approach is essential for receiving transformational insights and inspiring positive change. And finally, ensuring ongoing consent, which means continuously checking in with partners to make sure they're so comfortable with how their content is being used. And so, for example, this was how they ended up using the podcast again to promote their event. But sometimes, in bad situations, a relationship might deteriorate. And so I think it's the responsibility of communicators to check in regularly to see if partners are still comfortable with having their stories shared in this way. And so these principles really help ensure that our stories truly amplify community partner voices in ways that respect their perspectives and priorities. Lastly, I was asked to share some social media insights. So I want to talk about our transition from Twitter, or X, I'm just going to call it Twitter, to LinkedIn. So in November 2023, we made the significant decision to leave Twitter, which was our only social media channel at the time, with 916 followers. The motivations behind this decision were the increase in hate speech on the platform, a notable decrease in engagement, and of course, the chaotic changes following Elon Musk's acquisition. It simply wasn't the right environment for our work anymore. So in October 2023, we decided to start fresh by launching a LinkedIn page. We were motivated by our research showing that many of our community partners were active on LinkedIn, and we found that significantly more UBC staff were also using the platform. And what truly made LinkedIn the perfect fit for the CEN was how people use it in ways that align with our objectives. They connect and build their professional networks, they celebrate their work and achievements, and they actively seek out resources. LinkedIn provided us with more supportive and aligned space to engage with our community, and it's been a really excellent move for us. After a year on LinkedIn, our results have been very encouraging. We've surpassed our Twitter follower account, now reaching nearly 1,100 followers. Over the year, we've posted 114 times. This is an average about twice a week, which has resulted in 65,000 impressions and over 4,000 engagements, giving us a strong 7% engagement rate. This is about triple the engagement rate that we had on Twitter when we left. When we look at our follower demographics, the largest group is from research services, followed by higher education, government administration, and nonprofit organizations. And in terms of position seniority, our content is reaching a broad range of professionals, with 39% of our followers being at the entry level and 43% being at the manager and director level. And so these numbers really show that our content is resonating with the right audiences. And LinkedIn has proven to be an effective platform for us to connect with community partners, academic professionals, and other key stakeholders. Over the past year, we've identified several types of content that consistently perform well on our LinkedIn page. These include event recaps with photos, our team did a thing posts, videos and podcasts, funding recipient announcements, and event promos. So in conclusion, LinkedIn has provided a much healthier engagement environment for us, We see regular interaction with our content from community partners and staff who often tag us and share our posts. I don't think I ever remember an individual staff or community partner kind of resharing on LinkedIn, even if it was a story about them. Or sorry, on Twitter, I mean. And our team members are encouraged to also share their own updates on our page and use LinkedIn as a tool for their professional development. So for instance, Kat has the top 2 of our most engaged posts on LinkedIn. So I'm going to pass this off to Kat for just a quick summary again of takeaways.
Yeah, I think super quick because we're running up on time, but just thinking about the scope of your groups, audience for your groups. Seek professional communication support. Can you see how it's been a game changer for me? Now people actually know about the Community Engagement Network. Think about advisory or who can hold you accountable. And of course, walk the walk as you talk the talk. Oliver?
And then for me, my key takeaways for communications include be creative. Don't be afraid to break free from the traditional written Q&A format. And innovative approaches like videos and podcasts can help you stand out, often lead to greater amplification and engagement, and resonate more with community partner audiences, especially Indigenous audiences. Incorporate reciprocity. Always consider how your communications work can achieve both your goals and those of your community partners and interviewees. Collaborate with others who understand the importance of centering and respecting community partner voices. This can be challenging within institutional settings and for institutional communicators, but it's really essential for authentic storytelling. Enjoy the storytelling process. It should contribute to strengthening the partnerships you're spotlighting, making their work more rewarding for everyone involved. And finally, if you're considering leaving Twitter, you have my permission. I don't regret the decision for a second, and it's been a positive shift for our communications and team. Thank you. So yeah, we'll just open it up to questions.
Betty, I think
Betty, you're on mute.
Betty, you're muted.
Here I am yammering away and nobody can hear me. Just wanted to say thank you for that permission, because that is obviously something I think a lot of us have been talking about, and to hear how you've come through and advanced with LinkedIn is really positive. So we'll have a conversation about that offline, but I just want to make sure that we have a couple of minutes for questions, that if anybody out there does have questions, I'll mention that when we send the email out with the links and everything, we'll ask everybody to share their LinkedIn addresses, and we'll put that together in a message for you, a subsequent message, to make sure that you all know and can connect with each other in the LinkedIn world as well. There was one question, and I know that I had asked Kat about it earlier, and it was just where does the office, the CEN office, sit? Where does it? Who does it report to? And the answer was it's VP External Relations, and the office reports to the AVP Government Relations and Community Engagement. So that's sort of the structure there. I see bunches of questions coming in. Are they just kudos or are they questions?
And also Chris, I see, has raised his hand.
Yes, Chris, please go ahead.
Kat, Oliver, thank
Hey,
you.
Chris.
Feels like a blueprint. I won't deny. I feel jealous. Nice work.
We're often jealous of SFU, so that's okay.
It's a nuts and bolts question, probably for you, Oliver. But for the podcast, are you producing that completely out of your office, or do you have production support?
Yeah. So originally it was just me. I think there's some really amazing AI tools that have come out recently. I'd highly suggest people look into Adobe Podcast, which is free, and it's this wonderful service that's still in beta by Adobe. But essentially, you upload your recording, and a lot of our podcasts we actually do over Zoom, and we just record that audio, bring the audio into Adobe Podcast, and then Adobe Podcast will generate a written transcript of your interview, and then you can make text edits on the website, and then the website will edit your podcast for you. So you can remove like sentences, paragraphs in the text, and it'll remove it in the podcast. And then they also have this amazing like enhanced speech feature that will like take your Zoom quality recording and turn it into like essentially like podcast studio level quality. So definitely look into that. And that, yeah, so originally it was just by myself. Then I see JD is hopefully still in this meeting, but JD is our student And she started helping out with editing. So she did the AMSA podcast editing and did just such a brilliant job on that. And then, yeah, now we're actually getting like so many stories through our office that I was very fortunate to get like a little budget to hire external editing, because that's kind of where a lot of the bottleneck happens. And so I have a little bit of a budget to, I still do all the production and record, but now I'll send off the editing to an editor. And that helps a lot as well.
And Oliver, did you
Awesome.
say that did these take place during public activities or there's an audience? Because the ones that we saw, the video that we saw, clearly it looked like the people who were being
Yes.
interviewed had an audience
So
with them. So are you using your events as well?
yeah, so the Stories of Partnership one specifically with AMSA, and actually one that's coming up, are recorded with an audience. And so for that one, we were really fortunate to be able to work with an IT team at UBC that had that, I guess, capacity and expertise. And because it was within their faculty, they had I guess, a mandate to do that type of work. So it didn't cost us anything, which was really fortunate.
Well, and you've
So
got the
yeah,
challenge of picking up the audio of the audience if they're asking questions and that sort of stuff. It's not just the people you've mic'd on the stage, but you've also got the audience questions and things like that too, if there's interaction, right?
yeah, but yeah. So I mean, yeah, we were really lucky to work with somebody with the expertise, but it's not extraordinarily difficult. And I highly recommend, I think Zoom allowing people to record has really just opened the world for anybody to record their podcasts.
Well, and the important factor, it sounds like in all of that, is that the community voices are also being heard and are being consulted on in terms of what's being shared. But so I want to grab a question really quickly here. This is probably for Kat. How do you ensure the longevity of the network through changes in staff, budget, structure? Because we know that happens all the time in post-secondary.
Yeah, I was just trying to write a response, and I would say our director Katie here is too, and she might want to add her thoughts in the chat. That is a challenge, I think, and I think we could be doing a lot more. And I will say, when I get busy with other work, because this is not everything I do. This is like a little, probably 30% of my role, but it could be 100% of my role. It really could. Getting data is really important. I would say we are asked to justify it. Every once in a while, we're kind of, things are going well, and then it's sort of like, why are we spending a lot of time on this again? And let's remind. So getting that data has been really critical. And then it's a small budget, and haven't lost it yet. But yeah, I think I'm conscious of how networking again is a nice to have. So yeah, I'm just trying to gather as much data as possible.
And you made a really interesting point in your points at the end of your presentation, which was be ready to defend the value of your work in a lot of different capacities. And obviously it's a continual effort with the institutions to make sure they understand the relevance of what it is that you're doing. And the things that you're doing are certainly giving some profile to that, no question about it.
One thing, if I could just squeeze it really quick, is
please.
like we are asked to coordinate community engagement. That's in UBC's strategic plan. Coordinate community engagement. I'm convinced that this is our best way to do it, is to bring people together and make sure people know who else is doing that work, and that no fancy CRM is going to, magically solve the coordination challenges at our institutions. So that's a line that I hammer on a lot, is this is us coordinating community engagement.
Got a question here really quickly. We are at time, so if people need to leave, we certainly understand. Magda, are we okay to go a couple more minutes? Because there are a couple more questions, and I'll just mention that we do have a document we're going to send out to you. I was going to post it in the chat, but we're not there yet. Asking you what topics you want to talk about coming up in the next year, whether you'd like to present, what's a good time for you. You'll see that when we send you the recording and the follow-up notes from this presentation. So if you have to sign off, we understand. Magda, are we okay for a few more minutes?
Yeah, I'm certainly okay, and I'll just pop that link in the chat. If any of you have to
I've
sign
already got
off,
it pulled up if you want me to. I just wasn't going to pop it up yet, but I can.
Oh, I've just put it in.
Okay.
So, as you know, if any of you have to leave, feel free to just click on that and take a look
grab
at
the
it
link
later.
and take it with you. Yeah. Okay, we have a question here then. Are you, Kat and Oliver, are you okay for a couple extra minutes? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Where did that note go from David Peacock? Your unit is a service unit. It supports/serves faculties, centers, and programs at UBC that engage with community partners to enhance economic, social, and cultural well-being. Do you feel your unit actually produces/brokers knowledge through these relationships and convening that wouldn't otherwise exist, for example, beyond research and teaching functions? Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, if I'm interpreting that right. And maybe David, did you want to add anything on to that question so I make sure I understand that?
Yeah, no, I would hope you did. And I think
we
that's
are.
one of the problems with the field is that people don't realize that it is added value, which wouldn't exist otherwise. So by bringing those people together in new ways, creating and supporting and promoting new things, you're actually bringing into being things, something that wouldn't otherwise be there.
I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think you're right. That's kind of triggered something for me is, I'll make it really brief, but we had a situation within a faculty in which a role was discontinued. So lots of people do this work are contract positions, right? And so the role wasn't really valued. That person lost their role, and then somebody else who's actually an IT person was tasked at managing relationships in that faculty. So I was able to meet with that person and talk to them and say, by the way, there's about 250 of us across campus who do this work. We are community engagement professionals. And they didn't know that that was a field, right? They're working in different areas. So now I'm able to invite that person along and sort of have them network and see some examples of this work, but also to try to have a little bit of advocacy. Like, this is work to build relationships, maintain relationships on behalf of your institution. It's work that people really, need training and dialogue and conversations, and to think purposely about their approaches to this work. It's really critical, and you can't just have some random person in IT do it. So that's I think, as you say that, David, that's really helpful. I think we are producing brokers and knowledge through these relationships and achieving that goal of collectively increasing our capacity for reciprocal community university engagement.
Yeah, if I could maybe jump in on that too, Betty, before you go to the next question. But I think too, like I mentioned with the podcast, like kind of my feeling was that there was so much knowledge being generated at these events, and I wanted to capture and share that. And so I do see like podcasts also as a form of research or scholarship, and knowledge, I guess, exchange or mobilization that's now available to not just the CEN, but also people across UBC and even externally.
Well, and that's really interesting because I think as you were talking about the idea of somebody being in a faculty who didn't even know that 250 of you existed and were working in this area, I wonder, I mean, of course, so many campuses have so many other arms in other places. I'm curious as to how your relationship is going with UBC Okanagan. They're quite a distance away. It's not like you can drive across town and get to another campus. They're considerably further away. So how has it been sort of, I guess, initially engaging them and then continuing that relationship? Is it going well? What are the challenges you're finding with that?
Thanks for that question. Yeah, our membership of the Okanagan grew during the pandemic when we moved to virtual. So we have about 30 staff there versus 220 in Vancouver. And I get to go there in 2 weeks to host a meetup event and a Stories of Partnership event there in the Okanagan. It is hard, or obviously organizing a gathering in a campus which is 5 hours away. It also is difficult because people, I don't know how everyone else is feeling, but there's like an interest in gathering in person again and bringing people together. And as I mentioned earlier, like, space is really important for our conversations. So we've made a commitment to do 2 events in person in the Okanagan, and then still try to do virtual events, because the Okanagan colleagues and Vancouver colleagues like to network and to connect together. It is difficult. It's different. It's a different context there. UBC Okanagan, I always say, like, they really are an community engaged university. Their context is very different than the Vancouver campus. And so again, the advisory is really critical here. We've got one of them's here, Angela's here from UBC Okanagan. We have 2 advisors from the Okanagan campus, and I always have to make sure I check in with them. And I need their help to organize anything over there. Yeah.
And Oliver, what about you? The logistical challenges of working with UBCO? Are you getting there, or are you doing stuff long distance? How are you working things out with them?
Yeah, I have yet to go in person. I'd love to. But I have some connections with communicators there. And so I think, to be honest, it is a challenge when I'm trying to share stories with perhaps their central brand and public relations teams. Sometimes they don't always get it, and they might have a question like, how is this promoting student courses or something in that line? So kind of like looking for that very university-centric narrative, and that's kind of a risk, really, with all communicators. So what has worked for me is finding the communicators that do get it at UBCO and working through them, and they exist. There's plenty of them. Angela is no longer on this call, but Angela Han would be one of them who is here, or was here today. And what else? And then I guess also just mentioning too that Kat and I are working on this series, or like this Meet the CEN with UBCO, and we just found somebody at their kind of like central production studio who also had goals that aligned with ours of just promoting staff doing community engagement work. And he bought into the idea, saw our template, and is totally taking that on now, and funding it. So yeah, I guess just find the people that get the work.
And that's so interesting, because as you're building these networks, you're finding those people, right? I mean, that they actually do exist already. And if you can sort of come together and collaborate on that, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. I'm conscious of the time, but I do want to just read this last note that came in that I think really sums things up really, really nicely. Kristen, thank you. It says, in quotes, "Storytelling as scholarship is such an important, interesting way to explain the work and impact of the podcasts and of the network and the communications focuses around community engagement." And she says, thank you. And I think we probably all say thank you, because this was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. And I think we all learned a lot, and we have a lot to take forward with us, including sharing our LinkedIn addresses or building one Magda, which is something that CC Canada definitely needs to talk about. Maybe what I'll ask you to do just quickly, Magda, is turn off the recording, and I'll just close out the meeting, because as I say, I am conscious of the time.